My mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. That is lesson 8 from a workbook of A Course in Miracles. Hello, I'm Carla, psychotherapist and mindset coach, and on this channel, I help you get unstuck and reach your goals by exploring topics that shift your mindset so you can live your highest potential. All right, everyone, we are continuing the reading of each lesson of A Course in Miracles, the workbook. Today, we are on lesson 8, and I will be reading from Ken Wapnick's book. This is his notes on each of the lessons, which are so helpful if you're working through the workbook. It just gives a new perspective, it dives deep, it kind of breaks it up, and it helps us understand it a little bit better. And so this book here is A Journey Through the Workbook of A Course in Miracles by Ken Wapnick, one of the most prolific writers on A Course in Miracles. And today we're diving into lesson 8, My Mind is Preoccupied with Past Thoughts. There is a discernible sequence to the lessons as one continues to read and practice them. Jesus begins with simple ideas and statements about the way we perceive the world. He then quickly moves to the way we perceive our thoughts. And beginning with lesson 8, he develops much more clearly the specific cause and effect connection between our thoughts and the world. Here, for the first time in the workbook, he speaks about the world's unreality. He also introduces the idea of projection, a principle that was implied in the first 7 lessons, but will be clearly identified in the lessons that follow. Jesus has been telling us up to this point that what we see is meaningless because what we see is coming from what we think. And what we think, in our ego minds, is meaningless because it denies true meaning with a capital M. This has not been clearly stated in the lessons to date, although we have discussed it, but it certainly has been implied and will be more explicitly stated in the lessons to come. In lesson 7, I See Only the Past, introduced the idea that everything we perceive is meaningless because it is based on our thoughts of the past. In lesson 8, Jesus continues and extends his discussion of time and the past. My mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. It is not simply that we see only the past, which again was the theme of lesson 7, but we see only the past because we think only the past. And remember, what we think is what we see, because our thoughts are what project onto the screen of this outer world. Jesus is here introducing the idea that what we see outside comes from what we think inside, a major theme of the text. Projection makes perception. Projection makes perception. When we project out from our thoughts, it creates a world that we perceive. What we believe and have made real about ourselves within, whether as children of the ego or children of God, will be directly reflected in what we perceive outside because the inner and outer are the same. Let's read that again. What we believe and have made real about ourselves within. So think about yourself. What have you made real about yourself within? Is it fear-based, being a child of the ego, or is it love-based, being a child of God? Because whichever one you relate to, if you're really honest with yourself and look at the thought patterns, look at your beliefs, look at the results in your life. Do they invoke fear or do they invoke love? Whichever one will be directly reflected in what we perceive outside because our inner and outer are the same. This is a variation of the essential principle in A Course in Miracles that ideas leave not their source. So we think when we think of something or we judge something, it goes out here in this world. No, it just stays right here because it's all one. Whatever we put out, we get back. It's like that third law of motion. We shall return later to this all-important theme. That my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts is, of course, why we see only the past. Although not clearly stated here, but clearly implied, is the principle that what we see comes from what we think. That is why no one really sees anything. This is another one of those statements that when you begin to read the text and do the lessons, your mind would tend to gloss over because you really don't want to accept what Jesus is saying. He means this literally. No one really sees anything. He sees only his thoughts projected outward. In the text, there are many passages, a couple in the workbook too, where Jesus explains that the body's eyes do not see, just as the body does not think, feel, hear, or do anything. It's the mind. This is one of those really powerful lessons that we don't see with our eyes, our body's eyes, we don't see. We see with our mind. These are just an apparatus that's connected to seeing this illusion, the fractals of light, the illusions of the world. We don't hear with our ears. We hear with our emotions. We hear with our mind. So again, Jesus explains that the body's eyes do not see, just as the body does not think, feel, hear, or do anything. It simply does what the mind tells it to do. The body can be thought of then as simply a puppet or robot that carries out the dictates of its master. Wow. I'm going to read that again. The body can be thought of then as simply a puppet or a robot that carries out the dictates of its master. Truly, just like in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, the actions we take that get results in this world, if we reverse it, what emotions were driving our actions that drive the results? What thoughts fed and fueled that emotion, that fueled that behavior that created those results? So we think, we feel, we act, we get results. But we start on this result-oriented plane. We look at the results and we think we're obsessed with the level of effect. But what's the cause? The cause is thought. We have to go back to the cause, the root source, if we want to change the effect. This is a world of effect and a world of illusions, according to A Course in Miracles. And if this is just a screen and a projection, where's the tape? Where's the source? So thoughts, emotions, actions, results, which were caused by actions, which were caused by emotions, which were caused by thoughts. We have to start at the level of cause, not at the level of effect. Do not get caught up and addicted in the level of effect. Most people are. If they don't see it out here, they try to change and rearrange the furniture out here. It's just like that really great metaphor of if you're in a movie theater and you're watching a scene on a screen that you don't like, are you going to run up to the screen and try to rip it down and change the people? No, you're going to go up to the projection room and rip the tape out. It's so powerful. All right, so we are just puppets and robots of our mind. That's fun. That is why we do not see anything. All that we see, and basically this see should be in quotes, is a projection of what we have been thinking. So everything we see basically is a projection of what we've been thinking, and as we have seen, what we have been thinking in listening to the ego is quite simply nothing. The mind's preoccupation with the past is the cause of the misconception about time from which your seeing suffers. In the prelude, as well as in discussing the introduction of the workbook, I mentioned that one way of understanding time as we know it, i.e. as linear, past, present, future, is to see it as nothing more than a reflection or shadow of the ego's thought system of sin, guilt, and fear. When we choose our individuality over the Holy Spirit's oneness, and then seek to preserve this individual identity, the ego has us construct its thought system of sin, guilt, and fear. To restate this important dynamic, sin says we have sinned against God in the past. We experience guilt over what we have done in what the ego calls the present. And since guilt always demands punishment, we then become afraid of God's punishment, which we believe we deserve. That fear of punishment, of course, points to the future. If you keep in mind this unholy trinity of sin, past, guilt, present, and fear, future, as you read this first paragraph, it will make much more sense. When we look outside, we see a world ruled by time. It is, of course, also a world of space. Space and time, as the text describes them, are opposite sides of the same mistake. Thus, everything we see outside, we see in terms of the past because we see it through the lens of our individual identity. This identity is rooted in sin, the belief that we have separated from God and now exist as separate entities. Since we believe we are at war with God, a theme to be developed later, we must then also believe that we are at war with everyone else. That's something that really stood out for me when I'm reading this. It's like, yes, I want to be an individual, special person. I want me and mine. My body is here. Your all bodies are out there. My name is Carla. I am separate. I am special. I want what's for me. And I'm nice, so I want what's for everybody. But I'm special. I'm different. I'm here. You're over there. As opposed to, we're all one. I'm in one big river and there's no identity. I can't be individual. And the Course is saying, we truly don't want that. That's why we're here. We want to be separate. We don't want to be one. All right, thus everything we see outside is in terms of the past because we see it through the lens of our individual identity. This identity is rooted in sin, the belief that we have separated from God and now exist as separate entities. Since we believe we are at war with God, a theme to be developed later, we must then also believe that we are at war with everyone else. As a result, every perception in our world is geared toward dealing with the issue of specialness. Who is the special person who will win? And who is the special person who will lose? When this is expressed directly, it is special hate. When concealed, it is special love. Moreover, specialness is rooted in the ego's notion of time, which once again comes from the belief in sin, guilt, and fear. Thus, specialness cannot not be rooted in the past. The misconception about time is that it is real. There is a past, present, and future, and that the present and future are directly caused by the past. Thus, what we are today is because of our past. The future, likewise, will be merely an extension of the ego's present. Your mind cannot grasp the present, which is the only time there is. The ego's present is not this present, what A Course in Miracles refers to as the holy instant. As this experience is not rooted in time, it is also not rooted in sin, guilt, and fear. It is rooted in the right-minded presence of the Holy Spirit, in which vision, not based on the past, and certainly not on specialness, becomes the means for love to guide us from within. Your mind, therefore, cannot understand time and cannot, in fact, understand anything. This is because everything we think we understand is rooted in the seeming reality of the spatial and temporal world. As long as we identify ourselves as individuals, separate and autonomous, we must believe in the entirety of the ego system. Everything we perceive, therefore, will be a shadow of its illusory thought of separation, which means we will not understand anything. The one wholly true thought one can hold about the past is that it is not there. This is another one of those lines that, if you pay careful attention to it, should have you jumping out of the window. He's so funny. If you are a creature of the past and there is no past, then it must mean there is no you. In the present memory that opens chapter 28 in the text comes the sentence, "This world was over long ago." And so this is one of those things that book, The Disappearance of the Universe, helped me with. This whole experience was a thought, a misthought. It was when the Son of God forgot to laugh. We had a crazy thought that we could be separate from God. And we actually believed it, and we felt guilty for believing it. And so this whole experience, this dream, this illusion, is just a thought that is already over. We are all at home, at one, at peace. And this is just the aftermath of the dream that we will wake up from. But this is all over. It's already done, finito, finished. We're just still dreaming and waking up from it. So that sentence, "This world was over long ago," if this is true, it means you were over long ago too. This forces us to ask, who is the you that you think is reading these words? Or in Jesus's words in the text, who is the you who are living in this world? In other words, our existence is literally made up. And if you paid close attention to that thought, you would be terrified. If you are not, it is because you are not paying close attention to it. This statement is literally saying, as is a statement in lesson 8, that you do not exist. Wow. And again, just to check in, these are so wild. This thought system is so wild. But if you're at a point where you found the course, you realize that what are we believing? It's wild too to believe that there was some God that created this world that, yeah, has good, but it also has bad, and it doesn't make sense. It's like, that was my journey for sure. Like, something just wasn't adding up. When I read the course, it is crazy, it's wild, but it's very sobering, and it makes a lot of sense to me. It's actually the only thing that makes sense. Do I fully believe it? And no, I can't. Like, my mind is so far off, but I love, it's like my sobriety. It keeps me grounded, it keeps me sane. All right, so that statement is literally saying that we don't exist. This would explain, as we have mentioned earlier, why doing this workbook carefully and with diligence should make you extremely anxious, even if you are not quite sure where the anxiety is coming from. For me, it showed up in like resisting it, like, oh, I dreaded it. I could not keep the lesson in my mind. It just flew right out. I could memorize a whole poem, like a whole chapter of a book, but this little sentence, for the love of God, I could not remember it. And that was just my resistance showing up. I would get annoyed with it. I hated it. It was like a deep eye roll. There is a part of you that recognizes what this is saying, even though, again, the language is simple and does not appear to have the same metaphysical weight found in the text. This is why you forget the lessons, do not want to do them, and tend to gloss over them and focus only on their more superficial aspects. Yeah. To think about it at all is therefore to think about illusions. To think about the past is to think about illusions. Stop for a moment as you do this lesson and consider how almost every single thought you have throughout the day is based on the past, whether it is something as commonplace as picking up a coffee cup or something that would seem far more important. Thoughts about a situation, relationship, your body, or anything else are all predicated on the past, as they must be, because the past is nothing more than the sin's shadow, and sin is separation. And that's our whole experience. This whole experience of this whole universe is a separation, period. It's an idea that we could be separate from God or one another. As long as you believe that you are a separate entity, you must believe in the reality of sin and therefore of time. Very few have realized what is actually entailed in picturing the past or in anticipating the future. The mind is actually blank when it does this because it is not really thinking about anything. This statement is the basis of another statement we frequently say in workshops and classes. The thoughts we think are not our real thoughts. So the thoughts we think are not our real thoughts. They're thoughts of the ego. If they are not our real thoughts, they do not exist. It follows then that since we have identified with our thoughts, we do not exist either. And again, when it's saying we don't exist, meaning the individual Carla that is here with these eyes and this hair, this body, is an illusion. It doesn't really exist. My spirit and my awareness and my oneness with God really exists, but this separate Carla does not. All right, so if they are not our real thoughts, they do not exist, it follows that since we have identified with our thoughts, we do not really exist. The mind is actually blank when it does this because it is not really thinking about anything. Not only is our existence an illusion, indeed, all existence is an illusion, for it contrasts with the reality of being. The purpose of the exercise for today is to begin to train your mind to recognize when it is not really thinking at all. It is clear from statements like this, as well as many others, that Jesus' purpose in these lessons is to train our minds. Here, specifically, the focus is the idea of thinking, to have us realize that we are not really thinking at all. We will become aware of this by recognizing how much of our thoughts are rooted in the past, or, although this is not the point of the lesson, how much they are rooted in fear and the future. We become preoccupied with what is going to happen, whether we are talking about the next 5 minutes or the next 5 years, because these concerned thoughts of the future are rooted in our concerned thoughts of the past. All right, hang with me. This is a long one. While thoughtless ideas preoccupy your mind, the truth is blocked. Wow, that's a powerful statement. While thoughtless ideas preoccupy your mind, the truth is blocked. This idea will be developed as we proceed. The purpose of thoughtless ideas and holding on to the past is to block the truth. Purpose remains one of the central themes of A Course in Miracles, and Jesus repeatedly emphasizes it as the means for understanding the ego's thought system, as seen, for example, in his introduction to the laws of chaos. This, then, is another pregnant statement our minds could slide right past, because it reveals the motivation for holding on to thoughtless ideas, be they concerns of the past, fears of the future, or present feelings of guilt. They are all purposive attempts to keep hidden the truth of our identity as Christ. Recognize that your mind has been merely blank rather than believing that it is filled with real ideas is the first step to opening the way to vision. Really, just clearing your mind, emptying your mind, I guess that's what meditation does. But if we see it for what it really is, we're not just clearing our thoughts because we have a monkey mind. We're clearing our thoughts because they're just illusions. As is the case throughout the 3 books of A Course in Miracles, Jesus focuses on having us remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. These blocks are the problem. We do not have to be concerned about what Jesus or truth are doing, but we have to be vigilant about what the ego is doing. It is very helpful, therefore, to understand that in holding thoughtless ideas, our minds are blank because these ideas are about the past. That begins the process of opening up the door to true perception, the vision of true forgiveness that leads us to the truth. So some of the early exercises ask us to have our eyes open while we do them. The point here, and later on as well, is that there is no difference between what we see or what we think. They are the same. Here, Jesus is not talking about what we are perceiving externally, but focusing on what we are thinking. We see again the important emphasis placed on not making any of our thoughts special or more or less important than any other. He goes on to talk about the lesson for the day, name each one, each thought by the central figure or theme it contains, and pass on to the next. I seem to be thinking about blank, then name each of your thoughts specifically. For example, I seem to be thinking about my sister, about my car, about this anxiety, and so on, concluding at the end of the mind-searching period, but my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. Thus, we are asked to practice the central aspect of the process of forgiveness, bringing the specifics of our illusions to the non-specific truth of the Holy Spirit, expressed here in the statement, but my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. Here is another wonderful example of how Jesus, at the same time he inspires us with his gentleness and patience, uses our resistance as part of our healing, as he states in the text in the context of specialness. Such is the Holy Spirit's kind perception of specialness, his use of what you made to heal instead of harm. Even our irritation can serve the Holy Spirit's purpose of forgiveness if we let him help us. Wow. All right. That was lesson 8 of A Course in Miracles workbook. My mind is preoccupied with past thoughts, and there's no such thing as the past. The past doesn't exist. These thoughts don't exist. I don't exist. Wow. This is wild, y'all. I hope you're hanging on. We will continue lesson 9 next time. Thank you again for joining me. Leave comments, leave questions. Let me know how this is going for you. We're in this together. This is going to be quite the journey. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.